Welcome into the best damn college football show out there. He's Robbie Veno. I'm Drew Martin. We're breaking down the national championship game. Robbie, welcome in. How you feeling, buddy?
I am feeling good, Drew. We had a little technical difficulty yesterday. Want to apologize to the viewers who were all geared up to see us. In fact, Drew and I were basically on together when my power went down for the third time in about 25 minutes due to a car accident, no less than 200 yards right from my office here. So, transformers taken out and everything else. We didn't get our power back till like 6 o'clock last night, Drew. It was terrible. Um, but anyway, we're here today to break down this Ohio State Alabama game. And I love, I don't love that it's the conclusion of our run here for this season on Best Damn, but I really, the weeks that we did it, Drew, starting with you and I together way back last April when coronavirus first hit, and starting a college football season preview, basically the weeks that we went through. Hey, I loved every minute of it. Glad for the listeners here, and hopefully we can close this thing up with a real good show today.
Absolutely. Well said, Robbie. This started back in April, in the middle of the pandemic. Robbie had a great idea to be just breaking down each conference in college football, going through it. We did it. And guys in the chat box, Robbie, they were saying, why are you even doing this? There's going to be no college football season. Here we are, the last show of the season, guys. And we got one game left, Robbie, because next Tuesday, it was the day we were always doing the best damn college football show. There will be no college football games left. So we got one game to break down, Robbie. Welcome in the chat box. If you're watching live, Mike, Eddie, Wes, Sumner, all welcome in. Feel free to chime in the chat box what you're looking to bet in the national championship game and why. We'll get it out to the listeners. Robbie, we got Monday, January 11th. Hard Rock Stadium, Miami Gardens, Florida, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific kick on ESPN. You can watch it multitude of channels on ESPN. Ohio State and Alabama. We're seeing Alabama minus 8-point favorites as we're talking Wednesday, 5 days before kickoff here, 75 being the total. Robbie, Ohio State, they look surprising in their semifinal game. You can't take anything away from it. In the look ahead lines, which multitude of sports books put out, it was Alabama minus 11 over Ohio State. Now we're seeing it minus 8, so a big move there. Ohio State showing well. Alabama, the highest power rated team in college football. Pretty much, I want to say all season long, if not a majority of the season. 12-0 this season, 8-4 ATS. ATS meaning against the spread. 8 wins, 4 losses, 7-5 to the over. And Ohio State coming from the Big Ten, 7-0 on the year straight up, 4-3 against the spread, 4-2. Slight over trenders, 5-2, depending on what line you got them at throughout the season. But Robbie, I'll throw it over to you. I mean, what are your kind of opening thoughts here with the national championship game on Monday night?
Yeah, there's so many moving parts right now, right, Drew? But I'm going to start, and we're going to do a little back and forth here between me and Drew, so we'll have time to cover all aspects of this game. Real quick, Drew, when you mentioned Alabama being the highest power rated team all season long, I'll just give you this comparison. Alabama goes into this game, at least in my power ratings, they go into this game rated 1 point higher than LSU was when they played Clemson in the national championship last year. So it goes to show you how dominant Alabama's been all season long. I'm going to start it this way, though, Drew, because when I first began the handicap of this game, for me, it started with players. And I'm going to give you 3: Justin Fields, Patrick Surtain, and Jalen Waddle. And I'll add into the Patrick Surtain the second block there, Sean Wade, cornerback for Ohio State. Justin Fields, I mentioned him because we still don't know how banged up he is. He performed very well after the hit by Skolsky of Clemson in that semifinal game. All systems are go for him. We just don't know how hurt he is, and they won't reveal what the injury exactly is. So we don't know what part of the body is ailing Justin Fields. He came out after the game last week and said that certainly he was in pain every time he threw the ball the remainder of the game, but the pain came after the release. So if you're not feeling anything during the release, that's a good sign. After the release, he had to endure a little bit of the pain. I don't want to say a little bit as if it was minimal. I just mean he had to endure pain after the throw. So Justin Fields, a little bit of a question mark in some people's minds at this point in time. I'll go now to Jalen Waddle, who was at practice yesterday for Alabama for the first time in weeks. He's been medically cleared to practice, and when Nick Saban says he has a chance to play, the interpretation of that is he's going to play, right? I mean, he's going to play in this game, which just adds more firepower to that Alabama offense. And last but not least, I'll go through Patrick Surtain, the corner, a potential, at this point in time, Drew, from everything I see, a top 5, top 6 NFL draft pick, the number 1 cornerback off the board, Patrick Surtain for Alabama. Ohio State heavily relies on 2 receivers for the majority of their offensive pass production, Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. Patrick Surtain is capable of gluing onto one of those 2 guys and not taking him totally out of the game, but certainly holding whichever receiver it is. I would figure if they do go man-to-man, it would be Chris Olave. Hold him to less production than he averages throughout the course of the season. So that's a big matchup that Clemson did not have in their game against Ohio State. They didn't have that star corner to maybe latch on to somebody and keep him a little bit quiet. For Ohio State, their person in that same position is Shaun Wade. But Shaun Wade's season has been very up and down. And in fact, a couple of things I'm reading now, some draft stock falling. Of course, that could turn around here with a huge game. But then the question is, who do you attach Shaun Wade to with that, multitude of Alabama receivers? So I think those are your most important players in this game. I think the differences they can make in this contest are huge, depending upon which way you look at it. But for me, Fields, Surtain, and Waddle were where I started this handicap.
Okay. I don't disagree really with any of your kind of matchup breakdown there, Robbie. I'm going to kind of turn the wheels a little bit in terms of just kind of stats that I found in researching this game. Robbie, want to get your opinion on some of them. One, this is the highest totaled national championship game in the BCS playoff era. I didn't go back before the BCS just because I'm kind of going off the top of my head thinking they didn't score as much back in that time in college football. So I'm thinking this is the highest totaled national championship game ever, considering the national championship game really started in the BCS era. Bama favored in 79 consecutive games, Robbie. Very surprising to me. 151 of the last 152. Nick Saban has really built something there in Tuscaloosa if you've been living under a rock for the last decade or so. In the playoffs here, Robbie, this year, both underdogs covered last week. Notre Dame plus 19, slipping through the back door. Ohio State obviously covering the plus 7, winning outright against Clemson. I always like to look at, especially when you get later in bowl season, Robbie, how each conference did in bowl season. Of course, we got the SEC versus the Big Ten in this national championship game. The SEC in bowl season went 6-2, strong showing overall. Big Ten 3-1, also a strong showing here. And they actually played each other twice, Robbie. Northwestern beating Auburn 35-19 as -4-point favorites. A game I was at, Robbie, in person in what the old Citrus Bowl there in Orlando. And, something I noticed, because one thing COVID-19 does is, one thing it does is raise the ticket prices of bowl games. Had to pay a little bit more than I wanted to go to that one. And another thing it does is it's kind of cool because you can walk right behind the sidelines. I mean, you're not really supposed to, but kind of eyeing the personnel on both teams. Northwestern looked big against Auburn. They look ready to rock, and sure enough, they beat them on the field. So that's one thing I could kind of take over to being there in person. The next thing I would go over is Ole Miss beat Indiana 26-20 as plus 7.5-point underdogs. So the two conferences against each other, 1-1, Robbie. Just looking at, I think the Big Ten can stand strong with the SEC. I really do. And I wouldn't take too much away from Ohio State playing that short of a sample size in terms of, only playing 7 games. And I was of the camp, Robbie, where, man, should they really make the playoffs? They really haven't played enough games. But no, I think that they should, and they should be in the national championship game, beating Clemson the way they did, Robbie. So I don't want to take too much away from Ohio State. This almost has the feel of them kind of coming out of nowhere that season that they lost to Virginia Tech and then went on to win the national championship. I kind of have that in the back of my mind where, watch out. I thought Alabama was going to win this going away, and now I'm not so sure. But at the same time, one thing you kind of learn in sports betting, Robbie, is don't change the tune just due to one game too much, even though Justin Fields looked really, really good. Bama, first team to go 10-0 in conference in the SEC, fifth undefeated regular season under Nick Saban. They won all of their regular season games, Robbie, by more than 2 touchdowns. I believe that even includes the Ole Miss game. Could be off on that. Only 52-46 win against Florida in the SEC championship game. Bama averaging 48 points per game. And here's where I think we might get an advantage, betting first quarter, first half. Alabama really came out smoking, Robbie. In the first quarter, Alabama scored 146 points. Their opponents only 37. So that might be something I'd look to bet Alabama. People talking about Alabama first half, Alabama first quarter. I might look to bet both of those bets in this national championship game, Robbie. So I'll throw it over to you. Anything on those kind of stats?
Well, obviously, our friend and third partner on this show, Ralph Michaels, Alabama first half in our best bet segment was automatic out of his mouth for weeks, right? And it produced. Alabama, I believe, drew 10-2 on the season against the spread first half. They go into this particular game on an 8-0 streak against the spread first half. So Ralph was onto something early. It certainly has stood the test of a season, and we'll see if they can get there this time around. Power rating wise for this game, I show Alabama -6, so there is some inflation in this price, probably due to, as I mentioned earlier, the iffy status of Justin Fields. And now this morning, Drew, we hear, conflicting reports about coronavirus inside the Ohio State program. It's been certainly, negated by some voices inside the Ohio State program, and the commissioner of college football, or excuse me, by the NCAA, who said that this game will go on Monday as scheduled. There's nothing to worry about here. So, I mean, there's a lot of floating circumstances in this game, but I'm going to take it from the standpoint everybody's going to show, everybody's going to be healthy. And to your point, Ohio State has the athletes to go with Alabama. There's no question about that. They are man for man. They certainly belong on the same field as Alabama. Let's just start here real quick with the Alabama offense versus the Alabama defense. And when I flip them, Drew, I can almost repeat myself with both. But Ohio State, obviously, let's start here with where Ohio State lost their steam with the public, the betting public, and the sharp bettors somewhat as well. The last 2 weeks of the season is when Justin Fields all of a sudden was looked at nationally as a subpar quarterback. He's lost something. He's not playing the way he should. Except that the last 2 games of the season, Ohio State played without 23 and 26 players due to coronavirus. They played shorthanded in those games. One of those games, they still lit up the scoreboard despite not having 3 starting offensive linemen in that contest. So they beat Northwestern without 23 players on their team. And you just, noted that you walked Northwestern sideline and saw that that's a pretty sizable football team. So that's a good win. You give him all his parts back, Chris Olave back against Clemson, and what do? They destroy Clemson. I think Clemson might have taken him a little lightly, but I don't think Justin Fields lost anything. I just think it was the absence of players during those final 2 games of their season that maybe made them look a little bit subpar. Certainly they didn't look that way last week. They're balanced. Trey Sermon has come on as a running back. Their offensive line matches up against Alabama's offensive line. The defensive line matches up against their defensive line. The one part I will say, Drew, where they're a little bit depth shy against Alabama is in the receiving core, especially if Waddle plays, because while, as I mentioned, Olave and Wilson combined for an overwhelming majority of their passing yardage game by game, You look at Alabama with Devontae Smith, who won the Heisman Trophy last night, Jalen Waddle now, who should be there, John Mechie, and the emergence of Jaleel Billingsley. And Alabama's just got more guys to cover than Ohio State does. That's the only difference I can see in comparing offenses. Both speed teams, both can be power teams, run teams, pass teams. It doesn't matter. The one other slight advantage towards Alabama is that X and O wise, fundamentally, they throw to the running back, Najee Harris, better than Ohio State throws to their running back. Najee Harris contributes about 28 to 30 yards receiving per game, while Ohio State only gets about 13 out of their running back position in Trey Sermon. So something to look for where play calling is concerned. I know Steve Sarkisian's out the door to Texas. He will coach this game. He's been a great play caller all season long. Good matchup there. So both of these teams really, they match up well. I'm going to give you one more difference that might, I won't even say might. I think it does favor Alabama. In that 52-46 game against Florida, and you talked about it, you said it's the only game that they didn't win by double digits, but they were hurt defensively by what most would call a freak at the tight end position, Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts, 7 receptions in that game, 129 yards, 18.4 per catch, a touchdown. Nobody has that guy, Drew. Ohio State doesn't have that guy. Their tight end is not Kyle Pitts. So, again, it's one less thing that you could hurt Alabama with. You know, there's a vulnerability there. Kyle Pitts creates a vulnerability for any defense, not just Alabama's. So I think in breaking it down, the slight edges that I find for Alabama, more wide receiver depth, better throwing out of the backfield to their running back, and they don't have to worry about the tight end destroying them the way Florida did to keep pace at 52-46, because Florida's defense certainly less than Ohio State's. To me, you know, last year, I think LSU was 3-point favorites with a total of 68.5. Game fell just shy, 42-25, hit 67 points. Question for the total is, can we get one more touchdown out of these two teams than what we got last year out of Clemson LSU? I think the possibility's there. Alabama offensively on par with the LSU offense. Ohio State offensively on par with last year's Clemson offense. To me, it has all the makings of a shootout. We'll see. I want to just go back to your first half numbers and say this: where totals are concerned, in the first half this season, Alabama went 8-4 over the total first half. The 4 times they stayed under, they held their opponent to 7 points or less. It was an inferior opponent in each case that they held to 7, 3, 3, and 0. They're not holding Ohio State to 7, 3, 3, or 0. Logically, they're not. I mean, it could always happen, but obviously when you handicap these things, you have to go for what you feel is going to happen. I don't think Ohio State gets held to 7. So the total in the first half, as far as over is concerned, could be live here as well as the Alabama play. But this line is going to bounce, I think, Drew, because by the end of this practice week, I think people are going to realize Justin Fields is okay. Either he's okay or he's not. If he's okay, this line is going to come backwards from 8 down to 7.5. If he's not okay, and there's a lot of time to figure that out, then this game's going to fly even further. So if you're on the side of Ohio State here, you probably have to wait on Justin Fields. And if you're on the side of Alabama, I would say you probably just play now. Again, I do think it will come back a little bit to 7.5 if Fields is deemed okay. But I just don't know, with all the public money that's going to come here, that you would wait if you like Alabama. So we're doing this early. Again, it's Wednesday afternoon when we're doing this, Drew, but that would be my best advice for the time being.
Good stuff, Robbie. You've got 5 days till kickoff here. Just doing a little research, weather, location. It looks like Ohio State played in the Orange Bowl in 2014, losing 40-35 to Clemson. I think that's their last time playing in Hard Rock Stadium. Not sure if it was called Hard Rock Stadium. Somewhere in between Hard Rock Stadium and Joe Robbie Stadium. The same stadium, though. Looks like in Alabama, it seems like plays in this stadium, every other year, Robbie. Miami 73 degrees, 9 miles per hour wind, 10% rain chance here in Miami, Florida for Monday night. Of course, talking about South Florida weather, you want to check that a little bit closer to kickoff if you're looking for weather to be a key in that. Talking about the total here, Robbie, 25 straight games scoring 28 plus points. The Alabama Crimson Tide team. So that kind of speaks to consistency scoring points offensively for Alabama. Went back and checked their Ole Miss score, 63-48. So they did cover that game by 2 touchdowns. I was a little worried about my stat there in terms of Alabama beating every regular season opponent by 2 touchdowns or more, but they did beat the Ole Miss Rebels by more than 2 touchdowns. So that is a true stat, guys. Do want to give a couple props here to Ohio State before we wrap it up, Robbie.
Sure.
Ohio State, Urban Meyer, Robbie Veno, 23-1 under Ryan Day. So he's kind of got this ball rolling for Ohio State. And one matchup where I think Ohio State has an advantage here, Robbie, want to get your opinion. Ohio State defensive lineman, their defensive tackle, Haskell Garrett, a senior from Las Vegas, Nevada. He's a guy that's really good. I mean, really, some of their interior defensive linemen, I think, are very good. He was shot in the face the week prior to the first game, and he's going up against their backup center in Alabama. Keep in mind, their center went down in the SEC championship game, Chris Owens. So, kind of a starter injury to go up against a pretty good defensive line for Ohio State. Pretty good might be putting it lightly, Robbie. I think that's something that, if you're looking to go heavy on Alabama, you got to be a little bit worried about, something to keep in mind there. But overall, always tough to go against Alabama. And Robbie, I'll throw it over to you. Anything in conclusion you want to throw out there for the national championship game before we start wrapping it up?
Well, I will say this, Drew. The 3 slight advantages that I listed for Alabama's offense, then you have to weigh to yourself, are those 3 advantages worth 8 points? I mean, you can have advantages, but the point spread's the great equalizer in the long run. And Ohio State certainly more than capable. To your point about defensive linemen, this is not a stellar Alabama offensive line like we've seen in recent history, right? Notre Dame has a very, very, I'll say, excellent offensive line, even though they were minus their center in that game against Alabama. Alabama didn't penetrate much. Ian Book wasn't really rattled much in that contest from a pass rush perspective. So I think Ohio State's offensive line will hold up. They're so equal in so many positions, Drew. That's why we nitpicked here on this show and tried to point out slight advantages one way or the other. It's the 2 best teams in the land. I don't think there's any question about it. Ohio State at full strength belongs. They've got something to prove here. Mac Jones just continues to get less recognition than what he deserves, right? I mean, every pass I see this guy throw seems to be right on the money or in stride. We saw both running backs leap over cornerbacks in the semifinal games, right? Najee Harris goes over top of a Notre Dame guy, and then Trey Sermon goes over top of a Clemson guy. So it's a great game. I think it swings to the offense for sure, because I don't think either one of these teams puts what is a upper echelon defense onto the field here. So we'll see how this one goes. Turnovers will be key. Protect the football for both sides, and special teams may play a huge part too. Remember, the punt return specialist for Alabama might have a little bit more home run threat than Ohio State does. But this should be a great national championship game. The matchup is what it should be. I think it's better than it would have been if it was Clemson, Alabama. I think Alabama probably would have taken Clemson or beaten Clemson a little worse than what they'll do to Ohio State.
Robbie, another show if the game is moved to January 18th, or do you think that's really not a possibility?
We always let the audience speak, right? I don't know. If we think there's more to add, Drew, I think we could add. But if there's nothing to add, we'll just, bookmark this show and come back and rewatch. What we know right now, we know. If we learn some more later and it does get moved back to the 18th, I think it's always a possibility. I'm always game for it, Drew.
All right, Robbie. Well, good stuff as always, guys. A little preview here, the national championship game. Stay tuned. We might put something else, Robbie. Not sure if you got anything going on Monday. Maybe a little last second look here at the national championship game, maybe get a couple other guys. So stay tuned to that WagerTalk YouTube channel. Also, if you're watching on Periscope, please smash the like button, and feel free, if you're watching on replay, to drop a comment below. Let us know what you're looking to bet and why. But Robbie, anything else you want to throw out there before we shut this down?
Yeah, real quick. Once again, thank you to the audience. Drew, a possibility of a Monday show prior to the game sounds great by me. So just let me know. And for everybody, good luck with this game. And hopefully, I want to say this: we'll get together on this, me, you, and Ralph. But hopefully, we'll be able to bring college football season preview as early as April again. I think that was a lot of fun the way we did it, and I think it was informative to the audience. So we'll get together, see if we can't arrange that a couple of months, maybe after the draft down the road, and or after spring practices get concluded if they do have them. But I think the possibility for that exists. I'd love to do that.
Sure, Robbie, and absolutely. I mean, we got NFL playoff stuff we're doing, guys. We'll have something on the draft for sure. College football previews, absolutely, Robbie. I don't know about April. I mean, that's kind of the start of baseball season, but heck, who knows? Maybe. I mean, definitely June, July timeframe. So, guys, stay tuned to the WagerTalk YouTube channel. Check out WagerTalk.com, SportsMemo.com. Got all kinds of deals here, guys. Especially 30-day all access deals. So check it out for each and every handicapper. Stay tuned, guys. We got the NFL Every Game on the Board podcast coming up with Minty Bets and Ski Profit, breaking down every single wild card playoff matchup this weekend. So stay tuned to the WagerTalk YouTube channel, guys. Thanks